All right. Kind of just jumping into it. The first thing I just want to say, especially to worship leaders, because, taking care of the drum kits on your campuses is kind of your responsibility. And first thing I just want to say is just don't be afraid to jump in and get your hands dirty with doing this process. But I know for a lot of you, or most of you, you're a guitar player, you're a piano player, and drums isn't really, your thing. And so maybe you're thinking, well, I don't have a volunteer to help me right now. And, I just don't want to mess anything up. I don't want to I don't know really what I'm doing. What we don't want to have happen is, to kind of let the kit sit over time and the heads and the drums start sounding, worse and worse week after week. So just jump in. I can tell you that for me, I get nervous when I do this because it's not always the same. There's a little bit of unpredictability when you do this. You have a drum head, that you're changing, and even within Remo drum heads, so you can have two vintage coated Emperors, 13-inch side by side, and they're not going to be the same totally when you change the head. So there's some unpredictability. You have all these moving parts that are touching up against each other: the rim, the head, the bearing edge. You have the human element of you trying to tune it. So it can be a little daunting, but just know I'm with you on that, and I feel your pain. Cameron, do you have good drumhead changing days and bad drumhead changing days? Cameron's been helping out with our DW kit, doing a great job changing it. But yeah, it varies from day to day sometimes when you're changing heads. But so jump in, get your hands dirty, and you guys can do this. So kind of the analogy of of why this sometimes is so difficult, because in this drum you have 6 tuning points, and it's kind of like tuning 6 guitar strings and trying to get them all in tune with each other, because you actually, on a guitar, you only have 1 tuning peg. But on a drum, you have, in this one, there's 6, or you could have 8 or 10. And to boot, when you go up and down on turn right to tune up the tension, or go left to turn down the tension, it adjusts it, or it affects all the other points around it. So you have that going as well. But our goal today is with tuning and changing a drum head, is to get the tune basically in tune with itself so that it can resonate and not have any wonkiness to it, okay? So a couple weeks ago, I talked about, during Zoom meeting, about why it's important to change a drum head, and I'll just kind of recap that really quick. So in general, when your drum heads get older, they're gonna lose a little bit of high frequencies. And just the quality of tone is not there anymore. They're also going to get harder to tune because you have a drummer just beating on this thing constantly, and you'll literally get this crater in the middle of the drum head. You're losing your linearity over your surface, so that's just going to make it harder to get in tune over time. So a few different reasons of why we're doing this, and so. What sound are we going for? You guys are really hearing these drum sounds all the time when you're, going through and practicing, for the weekend. You're hearing, Bethel, you're hearing Elevation, you're hearing, Thrive, or whatever new worship outfit we're doing a song for. And I think if you would really be intently A, B, all the different drum sounds between these, they're all going to sound a little bit different, but they're still within this general umbrella of what the worship drum sound is. And like I said before, it's kind of like a rock and pop drum sound. So I grew up in the 90s. Actually grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I'm a little bit older. But so I think of comparing it to some other rock music. I think in general, worship drumming or worship drum sounds are just a little bit lower in pitch. We like that big sound, So the anatomy of a sound of a drum, we want our attack to have some high frequencies and definition so the ear can hear the groove. When that's not there, it's kind of like this mushiness, and people aren't moving their head maybe as much to the music. And again, like I said before, if we're not changing our heads, you're going to lose some of those high frequencies. And if you're changing your heads regularly, your front of house engineer is going to love you for it because you're getting all those benefits. So a nice attack in the beginning. And then the body of the sound is kind of like a fat, thick sound. It's punchy. And then the sustain, we do want some sustain, but we don't want a ton of sustain. And I'm going to show you some ways to mitigate the sustain on a drum. But I'm going to be showing you some tools that I use. And I will send you the handout a little bit later that you guys can check out. And it's just basically, a list of those tools that you can click on. It'll take you to a link in Amazon or Sweetwater that you can go check out. There's also, if you want to go to Rockumentation, so I've taken all the drum resources off of Dropbox, and I've been starting to put them on Rockumentation. Thank you, Allison, for helping me do that. But I have a section on drum tuning in there, and there's a place where you can see the drum pitches. And with the drum pitches that I've sent out in Rockumentation, I just want you to guys to know, like, really everything I'm showing you today, including those pitches, is really just a guide for you. It's not like a mandate to say, hey, you need to tune your drum exactly to these pitches. But years ago, when I had a drum tech working with me here, we kind of went through all the new drum kits, the Ludwigs, and the Bubinga kits. We kind of just mapped out to pitches that worked pretty well. But those are on there in Rockumentation. So let's just talk a little bit about the terms so I can get through that really quick. So when I say something, you guys know what I'm talking about. Okay, I've kind of taken this drum apart a little bit. This is called a rim, or it's also referred to as a hoop. And these are tension rods. These are the things that you screw into what are called lug points. Okay? And the top head, the drum, the head that you hit with the stick, that can be called a batter head, or you can call it a top head. Those terms are pretty much interchangeable. And the bottom head can also be referred to as a resonant head. Cool. And this is the shell, obviously. And then the bearing edge is the point of the shell that touches the head. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. All right. So I wanted to start by talking about tom-toms, because I feel like toms, at least for me, are the hardest to tune, because there's so much of the drum sound and they're kind of open. And I think when you have a bad tuning on a drum, it really shows up in a tom. So I wanted to start talking about these. And on this drum, I'm going to attempt to do a live drumhead change for you. So we'll see how that goes. But I brought 4 different tom-toms with me. And I wanted to show you kind of the different tunings that I have on them and maybe how they sound with that. So 2 of them are in the ballpark of what we're looking for, and 2 of them sound a little bit different. So, and maybe a little bit not what we're looking for. So let's take this drum here. This is from our Ludwig Maple Classic kit. And let me just talk real quick about the pitch relationships on toms between the top and bottom head. Okay, so there's 3 different ways you can really do that. You can either have your top head lower in pitch than your bottom head, which is what this drum is. And then the next drum I'm going to show you has that reversed, where the top head is a little bit higher in pitch than the bottom head. And what that's going to do, the reason we offset those pitches a little bit is it's going to cut down on the sustain of the drum a little bit. So you can get a great sound by tuning both the top and bottom head to the same pitch. It's just probably going to ring out a little bit too much for your sound engineer. But what I'd say is if you're not getting enough sustain on your drums and you are trying to offset that pitch, then try tuning top and bottom to the same. So let's talk about this one here. So this is where the top head is a little bit lower in pitch than the bottom head. And I feel like this is pretty decent. So the quality of sound that you're hearing is a little bit of like a pitch, like near sound, okay? And again, a shorter sustain on this one. And I'm just going to talk really quick about what we're looking for when you guys are doing this. So if you're going to pay attention to something in this, pay attention to this. So we're looking for the drum heads to be in tune with themselves, okay? And that's how we're going to work on one head at a time. Each of these tension rods, as I said before, it's kind of like its own mini guitar string, and we're trying to get them all in tune together. So the way I'm going to test that, and I'm going to do that as I'm tuning up, changing a head and tuning it up, is just by hitting with a drumstick or with like a drum key or something like that, about an inch from each tension rod location, and examining the pitch of that and seeing if they're in tune with each other. okay? So I can hear some of them are a little bit higher, a little bit lower. That's actually okay, I think. I think in general, what I'm hearing though is I'm hearing a clean tone come through. I'm hearing a fundamental pitch come through on the drums. And let's listen to the bottom head. So I said this one is where the top head is a little bit lower in pitch than the bottom. So this one's gonna be a little higher. Okay. And so again, I'm hearing that fundamental pitch as the most prominent sound in the drum. I'm also hearing some harmonics as well. And just some other, there's maybe a little bit weirdness, but that's okay. Don't fret about that. So I think this drum is tuned pretty well. All right, so let's move on to the next one here. So in this instance, so that was a 13-inch. This is a 12-inch. That's maybe about as low as I'd want. I could maybe go a little bit lower in pitch than this. This is maybe about as high of a pitch as I'd want to use on a rack tom. So here, the top head is a little bit higher than the bottom. So you're going to get a little bit of that pitch decay, not a ton. And you're going to get a little bit of less sustain as well. But you're going to get a little bit of ring. And the nice thing about having the top head, I think, a little bit higher in pitch than the bottom is that for your drummer, the drummer's going to have a little bit of more stick definition to have when they're like doing their mega tom fills around the kit, which maybe you don't want. I don't know. So let's listen to this one here. Okay, some fatness in tone, a nice clear tone. Let's check the pitches. And so when I'm checking or tuning a drum head, I want to be muting this bottom head. Otherwise, I'm going to have sympathetic vibration between the two, and it's gonna throw you off a little bit. So let's listen to this. Again, I'm going along each different lug point and hitting it about an inch off of that. Bottom head, a little bit lower. Okay. All right. Let's get into the bad drum here. So this quality of sound is something that I kind of dread when I'm tuning drums. And let me just play it for you and see if you can hear what's wrong with it. Okay. The pitch isn't bad on this drum. But what are you guys hearing on this? A lot, right? Yeah, so the back end of that sound has this, it kind of builds up in volume a little bit, sounds out of tune, just sounds bad. A little bit of that is okay. You might have heard a little bit of that on the first drum, but this is just to a point where I'm like, well, that's just the dominant sound of this drum. And this can be caused by, obviously, drum heads that need to be changed, bad tuning. Let's just listen to where this drum is at. There's a dead spot. Okay. So yeah, does this sound familiar to anybody? Does anybody's drum kits ever sound like that? But that's a really common thing. And another thing that might happen is why you might get that is, you can have the top head perfectly in tune with itself, the bottom head perfectly in tune with itself, but to where the drum itself likes to live pitch-wise with the heads, it's just not jiving. So maybe you want to just bump everything up in pitch, or maybe everything down in pitch a little bit, or reverse the top head bottom relationship. I know on this kit, when we first got it, we were trying to do the bottom head lower in pitch, the top head lower in pitch and the bottom head higher in pitch. I think that's normally what people do, but we just couldn't get it to sound very good. And we're like, hey, let's reverse that. And the drum tech I had at the time, he mentioned to do that, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that was something that you did. But on this kit, it sounds a lot better with the top head a little bit higher than the lower head. So just keep that in mind. Here's one more drum. One more tom-tom. So this is off a kit I have at home, and it might become my only kit someday because I'm trying to sell my other drum kit. But this is a sound that is more like a jazz drum sound, okay? So this is a bit higher in pitch than you want. It sounds really nice. I really love this drum kit. But, the tone is clear, but it's just It's just a little bit too high. You guys hear the difference between the others? Okay. So here we're talking like 220 hertz on top. And these other ones are more like, the red one was 172 on top, and the blue one was 140 hertz on top. So the hertz is kind of the measurement I use when I'm measuring drums. Just wanted to say, I don't necessarily try to tune a drum to, a piano note like A3 or, C4, and try to get that perfectly in pitch with whatever the equal temperament measurement is. I don't worry about that. When I use a tune bot, which I'm going to show you in a little bit, I'm just going for relative pitches, and I'm looking at the tune bot to make sure, things are in tune with itself, but it's okay to not be exactly on an A or exactly on a C or whatever. So does that make sense? Yeah, let's change a drum head and see what happens. Just go for it. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is remove the head. So this is a drum key, obviously. So what I'm going to do is just kind of detune this a little bit, and just kind of watch. I'm going to kind of go in this crisscross pattern a little bit. I'm just going to do a couple and just detune it like this. And the little hack that I have is with the drill. So this is just a rechargeable DeWalt drill. These are real nice. And the nice thing about it is you can also buy a drum key drill bit. So these are really cool. This is just going to make it a little bit quicker, so I don't have to do that with a drum key. So I'm just going to go like this. I can just move my hand left. I'll take the tension rods out. Actually, I'm going to leave that in the rim. All right, so I'm just going to remove the old head, and I can leave the tension rods here in the rim, or the hoop. That's fine. I might take a little bit of a microcloth here, and I might wipe the inside of the drum hoop. Just get a little bit of the, any kind of like drum shavings. Drummers are like beavers, we have all the little wood chips in there. Get stuff like that out of there. What's that? All the rim shots. So here's our bearing edge on the drum. Just I was talking about that a little bit earlier, but this is really a spot of the drum you really want to try to protect, because this is the part of the shell that's going to touch the plastic of the drum head, right along here. And you nick this, if you damage it, then it could affect the tuning later on. So just try to be very careful when you're doing this. All right, so I'm going to put the new head on. And it really doesn't matter where the label goes. You can line it up with the other label of the other drum head. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to put the hoop back on, really simply. And there might be like a little bit of give. See that? A little bit of give here and here. Just try to get things aligned and centered. Maybe press down on it a little bit just to make sure it's completely flat. And I'm going to tune these up with finger tightening. Now, when I finger tighten the lugs, or the tension rods into the lugs, the way I do it is I just snug them up just a little bit. I'm not going to go too much on them. I just want them touching the rim. I'm just going to barely make these touch. I'm going to just check again the centering. Okay. So at this point, I just want to do some coarse tuning adjustments to kind of get this drum up to where we need to be, kind of, and then we'll seat the drum. So the pattern that I use for tuning a drum up uniformly or down uniformly is a crisscross pattern. And I'm just going to start with like a half turn. So I'm going to do that here, 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 and then here and here. Okay? And when I do this, I count out loud. And so if you ever hear me do that on stage, I'm not like recording a new click track. I am just changing drum heads. And the reason I count out loud is so I don't lose the number of that I need to be at. Many times, when I wasn't doing that, I'd be like, oh, wait, which lug am I on here? Because you want to do this kind of quickly. So let's do a half turn. So I'm going to go, and I got 6 lug points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They don't have to be exactly half turns, but somewhere around there. Let's try again. Let's do a second time. 1, 2. You hear that little crack sound? That's okay. 3, 4, 5. All right. Okay. So I got this tuned up a little bit. So let's just hit it with a stick and see where we're at. Oh my gosh, I want to cheer right now. Whenever I get to that point when I'm starting to hear that fundamental right away, I'm so excited. Okay, so the reason I was pushing down on the drum, there's times when I come in here, like I said, I have a bad drum head changing day, and I do all the right things. What I want to do is I want to uniformly tune things up. And so when I press down in the middle of this drum, it's usually a little bit looser than this. There's times when I can see like wrinklage going on the drum head, okay? Now, you're not going to see it as much here in the light, but that's okay. But something I started doing a couple years ago is just tuning by feel, tuning by looks of what the drum head looks like. So if you're starting off and your drum head's still a little bit loose, and you press down, and you see this wrinkles maybe on one side of the drum and not the other, and you see that it's flatter on this side and not this side, it basically means what? That this side here is going to need brought up in tuning a little bit, okay? And for me, like, I can also go around the drum and press here, and I can feel, and this takes a little bit of experience too, but I can feel sometimes when one lug point is a little bit looser. And what I would do before I continue, like I said, if it was I felt a lot of those wrinkles on one side, I would fix that right away. So let's just say the wrinkles were bad here. I would just be like, and kind of fix that side, and before I would continue. Does that make sense? So you can do that. It's not going to hurt anything. Okay, so this is doing really good. Okay, so you might get to that point, in which case it's going to be great. So the next thing I'm going to show you is called seating a drum head. And what that is, it's kind of like, I guess with the guitar, you get your guitar players out there, when you put on strings, you like pull them and stuff to kind of seat the, where they attach to, the bridge and whatnot. Am I using that terminology properly? And, what we're going to do is the same thing here. We're going to push down in the middle of the head. And what that's going to do, it's going to allow the drum head to conform to the bearing edge a little bit better. And and when I do this, I'm also going to hear some of that cracking again. And so what that cracking is it's just some of the extra glue that's in the rim of the drum head in this part, okay, that is breaking away, okay? And the reason we seat it is it's just because, again, we want that drum head, you're not going to stretch the plastic really. You're going to, make that drum head conform to the bearing edge a little bit better. And what it's going to do is it's going to make the drum not have to be tuned as much after you've done this process. You will still have to tune a little bit, but it's going to get you to that better sound quicker. So I have a little story with that. I was when I was probably about 18 or 19 living in Boston and going to music school. I bought some drum heads for my new drum kit, and I couldn't get it to sound good because I really didn't know how to tune heads. That was before YouTube, So I took my drum into the drum store, and I had the heads there, and I had it on, and I'm like, hey, could you help me with this? It's not sounding good. I bought these drum heads here. And the guy looks at it, and he's like, hey, well, did you seat the head? And dumb old me, I'm like, well, no, what's seating the head, And he proceeds to literally, put the drum on the ground, and then he stands and puts all his weight in the middle of the drum head and starts going like this, literally bouncing up and down on it. And I'm like, no, that's my new drum, man. You're killing me here. But then he picked it up. He tweaked a little bit more with the drum key, and it sounded awesome. And I'm like, okay, so that's how I know that, seating a drum head is important. So what I'm going to do with this, and this might, mess up my tuning a little bit, and I hope I don't break the table. I'm actually not that strong, but I don't know how sturdy this table is. But what I'm going to do is kind of give the drum CPR a little bit. And so I'm going to put my palm right in the middle of the drum, and I'm just going to press down, put a little bit of weight, and I'm going to do this 3 times. So let's just try this. try to get right in the center of the head. So 1, go like a 3rd turn. 2, this drum's not cracking a lot, that's all right. 3, I wonder if I bumped this. All right, let me just do it one more time. Okay, so, all right. So that's going to probably throw the tuning out a bit, but it will bounce back. So let's just put this to the side. I'm going to show you real quick how to use the tune bot. And, you know, I want to stress too, like you're going to use your ears when you do this. You could hear when I was, you know, you guys all have great ears. You can hear when I was hitting in each of the lug points, even on the in-tune drums, that there was little discrepancies. Did you guys hear that? Just tiny ones. But when I'm doing that process, I'm going to use the tune bot mostly to, let's say I find the pitches that I like on the drums, and I say, hey, I like, you know, we got this new kit in, we got the heads on it, and we found pitches that work on this kit. So let me go around and just measure where they're at. So that's really what you can use this for, is to figure out where those pitches are that make your drums sound the best. And then the next time you change the heads, you can kind of go to that spot. So to turn this thing on, and this is also in the handout that I'll send you, you just press the power button. And you can go either note or hertz. So that is note, and that's hertz. So I use hertz, like I said. So I'm going to place this, and I think this works probably a lot like a guitar tuner. I'm going to place this on the rim, and I'm going to place it next to the tension rod. Then I can go around. That's 189. I can go along each lug point. 185. You can hear that that's a little bit lower in pitch, so that read that pitch. Keep going around like this. Okay, so like I said, those little discrepancies of a few hertz is really negligible, but that's where this drum lives. All right, so let's go back to our drum here, see where we're at. See how it's a lot lower in pitch? So now I'm just going to try to bring the whole thing up because I know I'm lower than where I want to be. Now let's actually look and see where we're at, pitch-wise. Okay, 112, 110. And then I'm just going to do small tunes, small turns. 4, 5, 6. All right, let's see where we're at. A lot of times when you're tuning, you'll find you'll have a strong relationship between tension rods that are opposite of each other. So you can hear a little bit higher, a little bit lower. Let's see where we're at right here. 142. Okay, so I'm very close to where I want to be if I want to make it the same tuning that I had it earlier. Okay, so I can bring this one down a little bit. Okay, so I can choose to tune the lugs up that are a little bit lower in pitch. I can choose to tune the lugs that are higher in pitch down a little bit. So you can do it either way. So let's just try to keep going with this. Let me tune these down a little bit. As I said, there's a relationship between lugs or lug points opposite of each other. That one's a little high. Tune that down a little bit. Okay, pretty close to where I want to be. 140, let's see how that sounds. Cool, yeah, so there you go. That worked out really well. That's a good drum tuning day right there, how that worked out. Another thing I can do with that, thanks. Oh, boy. Where is my Sharpie now?
Jeff, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You're getting that out?
Yep.
Maybe you already covered this, but like how often, so you put on a new head,
Mm-hmm.
your drummer plays for the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
Monday you're like, oh dude, I probably should check my kit.
Mm-hmm.
Go through another rehearsal weekend. How often should you be just checking tuning?
That's a great question. I think here, Cameron and I, one of us is going to check it right before rehearsal. So, I think that's a good time. Sometimes on a Wednesday, if you got a Wednesday rehearsal, come in and just check the tuning of it. Like I said before, after you change the heads, for that first 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to need to do more retuning because, like I said, your drummer's playing the drums. They're still seating a little bit, and after that, the drum heads are going to settle in a little bit more, and you won't need to retune them as much. So, lastly, I will take some muffling, and I try to use as little muffling as possible, and I like to use this gaffer's tape because gaffer's tape is all over the stage area of LCB, so you can always find some. So I'll just take a little square like this, and I'll put it up in the up in that area. And my kind of thoughts with muffling is to use as little as you need. I kind of just do this standard because I pretty much know how much I'm going to need for these drums. Okay, and I have one in the bottom as well. Does that make sense? You can also use something like moon gel, which is these little kind of gel-like jelly things. I don't use them because I find they get dirty and they don't adhere to the drum after a while, so they tend to not work as well. But these do the job as well if you like the moon gel. Then I'll take a Sharpie and I'll basically just put the date of when I change the head. That way I know I don't have it written on my phone. I can go right to the drum kit and I can really just put like the month and the year. So like real small 8/23. Do that in the top and bottom head. That way I know when it's time to change heads, possibly the next time. Cool. I'm going to go back to the kit, and I'm going to just talk about something, Jordan, you brought up about the pitch relationships on the drum. So let's do that. I also want to talk about the floor toms. So as far as the process I showed you right there for changing a head on a drum, that's the process you're going to use for every head. So top and bottom tom, for your floor toms, for your top of your snare drum. The bottom of your snare drum, you don't want to seat that. That's going to be a little bit different, but some similarities there. So follow that same process. With floor toms, they can be a little tricky because they're sometimes a little bit lower in pitch, and it's sometimes hard to hear those nuances like you could on the rack tom, okay? So one thing I found to do, it's actually pretty quiet in here, but there are some reflections. There's AC going on, is you can take your tom into another room where it's carpeted, and that's where you're going to be able to put your ear up against each of those lug points so you can hear them, and you'll be able to hear those lower fundamentals come through a little bit better. So that's what I'd suggest to do if you're having trouble with your floor toms. The other thing I would say too with floor toms, especially if you have two floor toms, is that I know one time I was up here, I was trying to tune one of the floor toms, and I was having such a hard time because I was muting the bottom head, like as I should, but I couldn't get the top head in tune. I kept hearing this warbliness. And what was happening is I was having sympathetic vibration from the top of one floor tom occurring on the other floor tom. And I didn't realize it until, I had spent already 20 minutes working on it. Does that make sense? So if you are tuning up here floor toms, so I would take like a towel. If I'm tuning this floor tom, this low one, I would take a towel and I'd maybe put it on top of this drum head right here. So, but floor toms can be a little more tricky, but it's the same process with that. So the intervallic relationship between the toms, sometimes I've gone to campus and I've noticed that the rack tom has gone really low in pitch, and it's actually kind of close to the floor tom. So that's something you kind of want to avoid by having some kind of intervallic relationship that sounds like so if you have a drum fill, you kind of want ga 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 go. You kind of want that musicality of having that spread of differences of pitch between the drums. So let me just play these and see where these are at. Okay, so on a kit where you have one rack tom and one floor tom, you can have maybe a fourth or maybe a fifth between the two. And if you have more than that, you could maybe do a third. difference in pitch, okay? So in that sense, you might need to, if you're doing the hertz, you might need to see what note you're close to, but I feel that works out well. It also is going to give your drummer just some more options of like, hey, I need a low sound for this, or I need a higher sound to kind of play this song the way I hear it on the record. And so doing that is going to give your drummer the proper options for that intervallic spread. So does that kind of answer your question, Jordan? So, cool. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Best practices for that?
Yeah.
When do rings get involved?
Okay. So one thing I didn't say about muffling is that I think it's, and maybe I did mention this a little bit, but don't make muffling your go-to when you have a bad sounding drum, okay? Sometimes it's like, hey, this drum sounds like crap. Let's go, We all have been there maybe, or you know somebody who has been there, right? Where it's like, let's just tape the crap out of this thing and, see if we can get rid of that ring. So it's usually a tuning problem. It's usually, something like that. The rings I use, so Tim is talking about the O-rings or what's called an E-ring. So I do have these up here. These I think are really good on snares, but do you guys use them in Wilkes-Barre, the rings on the toms? Do you have the rings? Okay, okay, you don't use them. Okay. Oh, you guys use them. So you can get them for toms, and you can just buy a standard pack of 10, 12, 14, 16, and those can work really well, rather than, a piece of, the gaffer's tape. And, the gaffer's tape, I like it. Maybe it looks crappy if you're doing iMag and you're just like, I hate this, look at that tape. The rings can be good. But I like these on snares. And when I talk about snares, I'll talk about how I actually cut these up as well to different sizes to get different amounts. But that's also in the handout that I'm going to send you when I'm done. But
how did you choose your placement for that gaff tape?
I definitely don't want it, towards the center. I definitely want it towards the rim where the ring of the drum is happening over here. And I tend to put it between the tension rods. I tend to think that that's where it's helped the most. If I needed another piece of tape, let's say, I don't know, this ring is killing me. I can put another piece of tape. I have done that before, so I might put one over here. And if you deaden drums too much in our style, you're getting away from the genre of what we're doing. Deadening a drum too much is, I think of like Fleetwood Mac Rumors, like Dreams. Like really dead, like a Steve Gadd sound. And, it's just it's not really what we're looking for. So, all right, let's start talking about snares. It's 2:30, so I got a half hour left before I can let you guys go. So the snare is going to be basically the highest pitched drums on the kit. And there's been countless times I've come in to play and, I put a new heads on, and I'm like, man, I really like this tuning. And I'll write down like my top head pitch, and then I'll write down my bottom head pitch. And I've come up with so many different combinations that I basically came up with a range. And so this is in Rockumentation, where it talks about the drum pitches. So the top head I found to be anywhere from like 210 hertz to 265 hertz is a good area for that. And then the bottom head anywhere from 310 to 345. Okay. So this is a Black Magic. This is a brass drum. So a lot of the campuses have this drum. I've purchased several of these for you guys. You may have a wood drum still, but this is a very versatile drum. You can tune it up, you can tune it down. It'll still sound good. But a snare is very similar to a tom, in many ways. This has 10 lugs versus 6 lugs for the tom. So there's more lug points on this. But the obvious difference is going to be the snares on the bottom. What's that? This is one of the drums that we have here for Central. Yeah, right. So we're not using this drum a lot right now. But you're right. The heads are in need of tuning. I will say, though, if you have a drum kit and you haven't played it for a while, like when COVID happened, it's not like we were coming in and changing drum heads because we weren't playing on them. So not sure this is a COVID drum necessarily, but we have another, that one over there is one that we're using currently, as well as a Black Beauty, which is kind of like the upgrade from this. But the snares are, snare wires are going to be what makes that, obviously, that snare type sound. And it's just a couple of the terminology here. So this is called, this whole mechanism here that holds on the wire snares is called a snare strainer. So this is called a snare throw-off. So that's basically what disengages and engages the snare wires. And this the other side of that is just called the butt plate. And again, you have your wire snares, and then the straps that attach the wire snares that go into each of those. Yeah, and here is your tension knob for the snare throw-off. So as I tune this up, it's going to make those snare wires, tighter up against the bottom head. As I tune that down, it's going to do the opposite and make them looser. So as I get on the kit and I'll show you the difference of how that works and how the sound can change with that. So with the the bottom head is a lot different than the top head, and hopefully you guys are aware of this. I'm pretty sure you are, but I'll just show you the difference. The bottom head is very papery, and it's kind of meant to be that way. So when the snares vibrate on that, you can hear those snares and the high frequencies of the snares. And this is a bottom head for 14-inch floor tom. So don't confuse the two. You might have done that in the past, but on the label of the Remo drumhead, the cardboard box that it comes in, the one for the snare says SA, which means snare side, and this is BA. Okay, so just don't mix up the two. But with the snare side head, we're tuning this up. I used to kind of mess around with the tuning a little bit and try to go a little bit lower at times, but I found it really needs to be a little bit higher in pitch. So it's kind of like a timbali sound. So that's kind of like what we're looking for. And when the bottom head is tuned a little bit higher in pitch, then you're getting a little bit more snare definition on some of those ghost notes. You'll hear them come through a little bit more detailed, okay? So if you're missing that with your drummer, then maybe tune your bottom snare up a little bit, your snare head up a little bit, okay? So again, the range of this we found is like 310 to 345 as far as the bottom head. And the batter head, I'm about between 210 and 265 on top. And you can experiment with all this stuff. You can find out. You sit down with your drummer and a sound engineer, and test some of these tunings out and find out what works for you. So with snare wires, I would suggest, as a rule of thumb, that maybe I would change them once a year over time. And so I have a set here that's pretty bad shape. You can see that they're kind of like misshapen and they're not even anymore. And this one even has a wire that's fallen off. So when this happens, it's time to replace them. Here's a new set of the Pure Sound. So we use the Pure Sound, and these are really good. I like them because you don't have to change the straps every time you change the wires. So these are great. They're 20 strand. And when you install them, I'm not going to change these right now, but I'll just kind of go over a couple things to think of when you're changing these. So if I did have to put a whole new set, meaning the straps and the wires on, what I want to have happen is that when I have the drum fully tensioned tight, I want to have the snare wires be centered in the middle of the drum, not too far left, not too far right. Okay, it doesn't need to be perfect, but just kind of keep that in mind to do that. The other thing is that with the straps is that you also want these to not be crooked. So you can see here that I have this perpendicular, kind of like a 90-degree angle with the strap and where it meets this butt plate. Okay, So there's kind of an alignment here that is going to help out. And the nice thing is that, the Pure Sound have these little stripes or these little markings in them that will help you to get everything aligned. If, for instance, that you put the straps on too crooked, you might have, one edge of the snares pulling unevenly from another edge of the snares. And what that's going to happen is you're probably going to get a lot of extra snare buzz, and your snare wires will be compromised over time. They'll be misshapen, and you'll have to replace them a little bit earlier in the process. But the way I change these is I usually start by, feeding the strap through on the butt plate side, and I'll kind of, make it so that the snare wires are centered in the drum, and then I'll attach it to the other side, and I'll usually start by detuning this tension knob on the snares itself, and feeding this through on this side, aligning everything up. And what you're looking for is so that when the snare's throw off is completely off and your drummer hits the drum, you're not hearing any buzz. So on the drum, when this was on the drum stand, I wasn't getting any, but. And then the other thing you want to have happen is when you have the snare throw off completely on, I want to have a range of tension with this tension knob so that I have some room to go, room to go up in tension to make those snare wires tight. And that's going to allow you some different variances of sound with that. Okay, go over to the kit. I'm going to take this with me. This has a little bit of a different tuning. So this drum on the kit has a little bit of a lower pitch. So this top here is about as low as I'd want it to be. And I talked about the different tensions you can use with your snare wires. So let's tune this down a little bit. Okay. So I kind of like having the snare wires a little bit looser. I just feel like the drum sounds fatter to me, but you can run into. Can you hear a little bit of that after buzz? Now, that's not horrible. In the heat of the moment, when the whole band's playing, you're not really going to hear that too much. But so that's where the snare wires, I've tuned the tension knob on the throw-off down a bit. So let's tune this up here. This is a little bit tighter. Sounds pretty similar. I'm going to try to go as high as I can, but I think I ended further away than I wanted to. Okay, so that's definitely, giving it a bit of a different character. I would say on the Black Magics, the brass drums, you can even go higher than this on your snare wires, on your tension. Give it a shot if you haven't done it. These drums really can sing well when those snares are cranked. Other drums, you're going to get some choking going on, potentially, when they're too tight. So you'll know it'll just sound bad. Okay? So this, like I said, this is about as low of a pitch as I would go for a snare drum. I'm going to put the drum I was just using back on. So this is a little bit higher in pitch. This one is, let's see here. This is about 246 hertz. And so it's a little bit higher. So where the other one was about 210, about as low as we want to go, this is about a medium. I'm going to put the snares maybe about medium. Okay? Obviously, you can hear it's a little bit higher in pitch, but that can sound great in your room. Again, test them out. See which one you guys are liking more. This is going to have a little bit more crack to it. You may lack a little bit of that body, but that's, that might be working for you in your room. So I like both of these, really. So this is where the snare wires on this drum are a little bit low. One of the things, too, I'd like to say about a drummer that likes to have the snares really loose and kind of buzzy is that this is where you'll lose definition on like ghost notes and things like that. So if as a sound guy may say, hey, listen, I'm just not getting the definition on the snare, have your drummer, tune up the snare wires So let me crank these and see how high I can get on this drum. So I'm cranking up that tension knob on the snare wires. Okay, so that really sounds really nice. Okay, so we were talking about muffling earlier. So this drum here, and you might have seen this earlier, but I'm using one of the O rings or E rings, and I've kind of just cut it in half, or taken 2/3 of it. And so by doing that, I can basically choose how much muffling I'm applying to the drum. So those E ring packs, there's like 10 of them in a pack, so you're not going to run out of them anytime soon. So this is what it sounds like with a little bit of muffling. There's a little bit of ring on the drum, which I kind of like, but if that little bit of that ring is too much, then you can go to the full ring. So let's see if we can hear the difference between these two. So that versus this. Little bit of ring. So again, it's like a different color. Choose which one you want, choose which one you like, and go with it. Probably like crap. Actually, not too bad. You can try that if you wanted to too. Like if you're doing some, I don't know. But yeah, the muffling, the rings definitely are just great on the snares. I love them. I'm going to show you one more snare. So we talked about the person that comes in and just cranks the snare drum because they like that loud or that really tight sound. So this is a drum that I built when I was probably like 18 or 19. And I actually did my own finishing. That's a tongue oil finish. So I love this drum. Yeah, thank you. But this again was when this is, I don't know, let's say 20 years ago. This was 20 years ago or more. 30 years ago, actually, gosh. But, I haven't played on this thing in a while, but I brought it out here. But this has that higher sound. I like this drum. Sounds really great, doesn't it? Yeah, gospel. So there you go. It's like a gospel sound. And yeah, I love that sound. And I don't have a lot of muffling on it, but when you have the snare drum higher in pitch, you're not going to need as much muffling, I think. But that's the drummer that's going to come in and crank it. We love that sound, but it's like, hey, man, when I'm doing like, Son of Heaven, when we get to the chorus, just doesn't have that boosh sound to it. Just one word of caution, because I've fallen into this trap as well, is that, like I said, come in on Wednesday a little bit before rehearsal. You play the drums, and I know you got a ton of other things to do, so I'm going to play through the toms. And some of them are out of tune, and so I'm going to start tweaking them. Don't neglect the bottom head, okay, when you're doing this process. It's kind of a pain with the floor toms because you got to flip them over, and they're really big. But you're going to maybe spend a lot of time trying to tune them up. You're going to say, hey, this isn't working. That's because you forgot there's a bottom head that also affects the pitch of the sound of the drum as well. Yep, think about that. And as well, I think I mentioned this earlier, is that you can also, a drum set that's neglected, I'll know right away when I come up and I see tension rods from the bottoms of drums that have literally fallen out of the drum and are now on the drum riser. So just watch out for that too. They can get looser and fall out. Okay, so one of the things I did want to mention here with the snare drum, let me bring this one over. And I got some swag for you guys today. I got a freebie. I know, man. It's just amazing. Free black beauties, free for everybody. Something I use are called lug locks. So These are going to keep, especially the snare drum, in tune. You can't get out of here. There's no exit. We've blocked everything, Nikki. So these lug locks, they're these little plastic rectangles with a hole in it, and basically you put them over top of the drum tension rod, and you position them so that righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. If I'm going this way, they're going to keep the drum lug or the tension rod from detuning as I'm playing. And so I put them near. I don't need to put them on all the drum. I put them, right where I'm going to be playing or hitting the drum. So I like having the strainer, the snare throw off close to me. So I got 5 of them right here. You can also put 5 on the bottom as well, or 4. That's going to keep your snare drum. You don't really need to put them on toms as much. You can, but it's going to keep your snare drum in tune longer, and keep those tension rods from completely detuning and falling out of the bottom of your drum, like I talked about. So if you guys want some, I just ordered a big bag of them from the original lug lock company. So here we go. So first come, first serve. I got 10 in each Ziploc bag. Come and get one before the end of the day. It's a freebie here. So if you've done everything that I've told you to do and you're still at a point where I can't get this thing sounding good, I've done everything Jeff said, and there's still some it's like that bad tom, sometimes you'll have dead spots as well that you can't get rid of, which are really annoying. It's okay to just remove all the tension rods. One thing I do is I take the drum head and I'll get it all loosened up, and I'll take what I originally have and I'll just give it like a third of a turn or a half turn to kind of reseat it in a different position and just start over from scratch, okay? That's okay to do even after you seated the head. I found 9 times out of 10 that's gonna get you to where you need to be. So I didn't talk about the kick drum at all, right? And that's really because, especially, for me, I just find that we put we talked about muffling. I put the most muffling into the kick drum. So I don't really use a tune bot when I'm putting on a kick drum head. The way I do it is that I'll get the batter head, or the head that's hit with the beater, up a little bit higher in pitch than the resonant head, okay? Just a little bit. And what I'll do is if I put the batter head on, I want it tight enough so that when I press in with my finger, I'm just seeing a little bit of a wrinkle. That's kind of where I go with that. You can tune them up a little bit more. You can tune them down a little bit more. But you don't have to be meticulous with the kick drum tuning as you do a tom, because there's so much, muffling in the drum. Now, you don't want to put too much muffling in a kick drum. So I would shy away from, putting like a big pillow, into it. Maybe a little pillow. What I do on this drum kit, I have a packing blanket that's like a fourth of a packing blanket. So I've just cut it into like 1/4, and I have a little bit of that touching the batter side of the head. I have a little bit of the packing blanket touching the resonant side of the head. You can also use what's called a EQ pad by Evans. So those are really great. And they kind of do the same thing. It's like a professional bass drum pillow, I guess you can say. And then, part of it touches the batter head, part of it touches the resonant head. It's always good to put something in the kick. I think if you're using like an SM91, because, you have something then to put the mic on. So that works great.
Can you briefly speak about beaters, how that affects the drum?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see here. I will remove a beater. I think most of the drum kits, when I purchase a kit for a campus, I'm getting like Tama hardware. So a lot of the campuses have like a Tama kick drum pedal. Maybe it's called the Iron Cobra. But the beater is going to look something like this on the bass drum, okay? So one of the sides is felt, and one of the sides is plastic. So you can choose either side to have hit the kick drum head. And one more thing I would love to say about the kick drum head is where the beater hits the drum head, I would say also utilize that patch. I usually get you guys one of those every year. Make sure you put that, on the spot where the beater is hitting the head. Otherwise, you're going to get this dent in there, and it's just going to ruin the head. So those work great for this. But with the beater, like I said, there's a plastic side, there's a felt side. If the drummer wants to, sometimes it's a drummer's preference. Sometimes drummers prefer to use the felt side for the feel of it. Sometimes drummers prefer to use the plastic side. But for sound purposes, definitely for sound guy, you're going to get more of that, like, I don't know, 4K, maybe 3 to 4K definition on the kick drum when you're using the plastic side of the beater. And, you know, obviously using the felt side, it's going to be less of that. So what do you guys use? I'd love to know. Or either or, it works both ways. Felt, okay. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes the plastic is too prominent with the high frequencies on a kick drum. It sounds more like a metal drum, possibly. But yeah, that's a great question.
In terms of small rooms, this is specifically for the snare.
For the snare?
Yeah. To
Okay.
achieve, so that sound that we were playing with works really well in a big room. In a small room, from experience, that is going to be really hard to put any of that in the PA.
I'm sorry, any of that? Oh, in the PA.
The snare in the PA.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for still getting a nice beefy lower pitch just without the really loud?
Yeah. I think some of that has to do with the shell. The Black Magic is a loud drum. That's like the John Bonham drum. So this sucker can be pretty loud. So you might want to try a different drum. Ludwig makes what's called an acrolite, which is a chrome drum. And I think you can still buy them. They're not as loud. And you have a lot of versatility tuning with an acrolite as well. I don't own one. I have something similar to it. So the aluminum drum, it's just like a little bit of a softer metal that doesn't resonate as much. So I think that's going to help to do it. So that's the first thing I can think of. I was just... All right, I'm going to go show you guys these. Hold on 1 second. Give me 30 seconds. I have a few different options of what Brooke's talking about. The big fat snares. Actually, I got several. I think I went and just bought every model. But yeah, these are, you're familiar with these. Yeah, so I would suggest these for cutting down the volume of the sound. There's different types. Some of them have holes in them. And basically what you do with these is you just, it's kind of like a crazy O-ring, basically. It's going to really deaden the head. Actually, if I stack these, I can take the pitch of that drum's going to keep going down, I think. Kind of weird how that happens. That's too low, man. One more. So, yeah, I mean, the problem I think sometimes with these, because these were kind of cool or used a lot more maybe like several years ago when they came out, and a lot of times it's just a kind of a cover for like, okay, my snare drum really sounds bad, so I'm just gonna throw this thing on. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a great thing, is they can be used for volume purposes and whatnot. So that is a big fat sound. Not that one. Yeah. Possibly is my snare drum as well. So yeah, you can experiment with some of that stuff.
The one that's hole in it. There's one that's even bigger as well too.
Oh, bigger hole than that?
That one helps a lot because you can. What's actually nice is it kills two birds with one stone. You can drop the pitch down and bring the tuning, or like the actual tuning, up higher in the drum.
All right.
So when you get the drummers that don't like playing when it's super fat, they can still have that response and that bounce.
Yeah.
The actual pitch is lower.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to tune and EQ specifically knowing that's what you're shooting for.
Gotcha. Dude, I love that. But that's basically what I have. Are we done? 3 o'clock? Yeah?
Almost, but yeah, we're done with this part.
We're done with this part. Okay. So, but yeah, thanks everybody for...